Hello and welcome to another edition of Scott Nagel's Tennis Tips. I am Scott Nagel, bringing you a tip today from Venice, Italy. Today's tennis tip will be on doubles lob coverage in a variety of situations. The first type of lob coverage we'll be discussing is when both players are at the net and the lob is hit fairly short. There are a couple things to consider for who should take the lob. You might first consider who has the better overhead, and that player can take the overhead regardless of where the ball is hit. This might be discussed before the match even begins to determine who will take the overhead in those situations. If the ball is hit down the middle of the court, you might also consider who has an easier forehand overhead.
Ora sono solo smash per Raonic.
You'll also want to look at which side of the court the ball is on, so the player that has less distance to go can take the overhead. And who can take time away from the opponent by being more aggressive, even if it's hit with a backhand smash. If you have a left-handed and a right-handed combination and both players might have a forehand, you could opt for the player who has the better overhead. And finally, just communicate with your partner as the ball is hit to determine who's going to play that overhead smash. If the lob is clearly on one side or the other, for example, if it's hit over the player's head on the ad court, it's typically better for the player on the opposite half, in this case the player in the deuce side, to cover the lob behind their partner. There are a couple key reasons why you'd want to cover the ball behind your partner. Typically, when the ball is hit over your partner's head and you're running back to cover that lob, you can see the ball the entire time that you're running. If you're running for a ball over your own head, you'll have to turn your back to the court. You won't be able to see the ball as well. Also, you can't see what the other three players are doing. When you're covering the ball behind your partner, you can see what your partner's doing and the opponent's a little bit more easily. Finally, when covering the lob behind your partner, you're usually a little bit further back in the court to begin with. Therefore, you're a little closer to the lob that's being hit. If you're further back and the ball's lobbed over your own head and your partner's close to the net, typically they would not run behind you to cover the lob. When the lob goes over the player in the ad court's head, the deuce court player and the ad court player will change sides. Depending on where the lob is hit, the player at the net will shift in the direction of the ball. For example, if the ball's deep, the player at the net will stay a little further back, and if the ball is wide, the player at the net will shift in the direction of the ball. The partner who's not covering the lob should be watching his or her partner on either moving forward or backwards and towards their partner, depending on how much difficulty their partner is having in dealing with the oncoming lob. Watch how the partner ducks or shifts out of the way for their partner to return the lob with an overhead smash. After the smash, they both shift in the direction of the shot to prepare for the opponent's return. After you or your partner hit the lob, it's important to note where to move to next. If the lob is returned with a nice, deep, and aggressive lob over your opponent's head, it's a good idea to move forward. The player at the net can be more on top of the net, while the player that hit the lob can advance up to about mid-court. However, if the lob is hit weak and returned short, and the opposing team is about to hit an overhead smash, then both players move back and behind the baseline to prepare for the opponent's overhead. Early communication is essential in lob coverage. It's important to call out who's going to take the lob and to also call out the changing of sides. The more you play with your partner, the less some of this communication becomes necessary, as switching will become automatic, and even who covers the lob sometimes will be automatic as well. When the lob comes and both players indicate that they're going to cover the lob, there's a couple ways to resolve this dilemma. Firstly, if one player has made a strong movement commitment towards the ball, it may be a good idea to let them cover the lob. Secondly, you might defer to the stronger or more experienced player and let them handle the shot. The player with more momentum, perhaps by either being more aggressive moving forward or they hit the last couple of shots, is also a good choice for who should take the smash. This is less of a factor when the lob coverage is defensive. Also, after the first call is made, one of the two players may call the ball again, and if they're the only one that does this, then they would take the overhead. It's always a good idea to discuss these options with your partner, both during the match and after the match, so you come up with the best solution for you and your partner in these situations. While you're running back for the lob, it's good to consider where you're going to make the return and what type of shot you're going to hit. If you're running back to hit a backhand lob, typically you're going to put that ball up as a lob in return. If you're running back on your forehand side, it may be possible to hit an aggressive forehand or even an overhead smash return. When you're back behind the baseline, recovering the lob, you want to consider where your opponents are. It's a good idea to have your opponents switch sides, so if one player's at the net, one's on the baseline, and you lob over the player who's at the net, they'll have to change sides and cause more chaos for your opponents to deal with. Returning the ball cross court will give you a little bit more room to hit the ball into. Also, you might consider hitting the ball to your opponent's forehand side. Although this is their stronger side, typically they'll return the ball back cross court to your strength, which should be to your forehand. Yet, returning the lob to the opponent's backhand side may cause them the most difficulty. If both opponents are up or back, a great option is to hit down the middle. This less risk and can cause confusion between the opponents and give them less angle for their return.
Bob, it's pretty hard to throw that ball over the net. There's no cliff, mate.
You can also attempt a more aggressive angle shot or down the line shot. However, the risks do increase with these two options. As you're running back to cover the lob, these are just a few of the options that you might consider of where to place your return. Typically, if either you or your partner are already on the baseline and the ball is lobbed over one of your heads, the player who's already back should be the player to cover the lob. The player at the net, however, should look to see how good the lob is and how far back to retreat. The better the lob, the further back you'd want to retreat from the net. When you're hitting that response to the lob, consider where you and your partner are on the court and what type of return you would like from your opponents. A good deep lob from you would allow you to take the net back over, or hitting something as an aggressive forehand or backhand may even be an outright winner. There's a lot of different issues to talk about when doing lob coverage in doubles. These are just a few examples of some things to consider with you and your partner. Stay tuned for more tips from Scott Nagel Tennis, and we'll see you on the courts.
Quel